Hi, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to join all of you today at the Virtual GEM Summit. My name is Deepa Subramaniam, and I come to you via a pre-taped recording from the cozy comforts of my home here in Oakland, California. It's admittedly a wild time to be attending a conference virtually, but I'm truly pleased to be here with all of you. I hear that in this virtual room today, we have gathered together talent acquisition professionals, hiring managers, and CEOs who represent the future of talent teams and thus the health, safety, and diversity of thousands of organizations. It is my honor to be here with you, and I'm sure I will learn so much in the coming days about the challenges and opportunities that face talent recruiters and talent sourcers alike. Let me take a moment to introduce myself, why I'm here, and what I'll be covering in the approximate 30 minutes together that we have. As I said earlier, my name is Deepa Subramaniam, and I'm currently the Chief Technology and Digital Officer at the American Civil Liberties Union, a 100-year-old nonprofit dedicated to protecting the civil liberties and civil rights afforded to us in this country. For the next 30 minutes, I'd like you to sit back and join me as I tell you a little bit about my career, which has taken some really interesting twists and turns from the private sector to the public sector with a brief foray into politics. I owe the creative and inspiring journey that is my career to the countless recruiters who saw outside of the traditional bounds of role definition and introduced me to some of the most compelling and inspirational experiences of my professional career. Next, I want to talk a little bit about tactics I've observed to gain leadership buy-in on prioritizing recruiting, hiring, and retaining diverse and well-represented talent. Lastly, I want to address the challenges that exist in our world right now and the unique opportunities they pose to you as talent professionals. So with that, let's begin. Like I said earlier, I currently run the digital and tech teams at the ACLU. And if you're asking yourself, why does the ACLU have an in-house tech and digital team? Don't worry, I get asked this on a regular basis. The reality is the ACLU, though a nonprofit, looks and acts much like any organization that sees the power of harnessing custom product development and digital marketing to reach and grow its user base. My nearly 60-person tech and digital teams build and collaborate on digital products that grow our supporter base, raise money, help get our message out into the world, and mobilize our supporters to join us in protecting the most pressing civil liberties issues of our time, like voting rights, immigrants' rights, LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, criminal justice, security and privacy, free speech, and more. Though I'm currently at the ACLU, which is a nonprofit, my career actually started in the private sector. After graduating from UC Berkeley, go Bears, I went on to become an engineer at Macromedia, working on a Flash-based product called Flex, and I totally recognize that I'm dating myself with sharing that little fact with you all today. Macromedia went on to be acquired by Adobe, and I spent an amazing 10 years at Adobe, eventually moving from software engineering into technical product management. And I worked on a variety of products, including the pivot from shrink-wrap software like Creative Suite to the subscription-based Creative Cloud, a move that grew Adobe's market cap and Wall Street dominance markedly. After 10 years at Adobe, I wanted to take my interests and product experience into an organization that was more hands-on, working on the pressing needs of the world. I ended up joining Charity Water, an innovative clean water nonprofit based in New York, as their head of product. The reality is, 785 million people across the world lack access to clean water. Oftentimes, it is women and young children who spend hours each day walking to a water source like a lake or a river or a pond to fill jerry cans, clay pots, whatever vessel they can really find with dirty water. Dirty water that is alive with amoebas and parasites, swimming with leeches sometimes. 300 million people around the world have parasites in their bodies from dirty water. Really, no one should have to drink water that looks like that. Charity Water aims to solve this problem by raising awareness and significant funds to invest in local clean water solutions. They partner with local organizations on the ground to build clean water solutions that are appropriate for the environment. Through this, Charity Water has funded close to 60,000 water projects in 29 countries, serving nearly 12 million people clean water. It's absolutely incredible. About 2 years into my time at Charity Water, I remember exactly when this was. On Easter Sunday of 2015, I got a call from a recruiter, someone just like you, who totally changed my life. His name is Nat Kolak, and we knew each other casually through the tech and social goods scene in New York. Nat asked if I was interested in joining Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign to help put the first female president into the White House. Now, there are a few things that would draw me away from the mission of Charity Water, and helping to put Hillary Clinton in the White House was absolutely one of them. So in the early summer of 2015, I joined the wildest ride of my career yet, helping to run the tech team for Secretary Clinton's bid for the presidency in 2016. I fully recognize that your own personal views of politics or the 2016 election may differ with my own, and that is absolutely fine. However, I want to share some of my experiences on the campaign because I think they perfectly illustrate how prioritizing diversity in order to represent the nation's population led to a high-velocity output environment. So if you'll indulge me for a few moments, we're going to rewind back 4 years. My time on the 2016 campaign was the most satisfying and exhilarating adventure of my entire professional career. Even knowing now what a devastating loss we went through, if somehow we magically went back in time and I was asked to join the campaign again, I wouldn't hesitate to say yes. I had the opportunity to work with the smartest policy, political, organizing, legal, digital, and technical minds in a truly fast-paced environment. I joined the tech team when it was quite small, as their director of product. My work included helping to build out the online fundraising platform that went on to raise close to $973 million in just 22 months. I helped build custom products to help showcase Hillary Clinton's policies, like this interactive calculator that could help highlight how her college affordability plan worked. I also helped to lead product on a variety of rapid response projects, which aimed to highlight her vast experience and contrast that with Donald Trump. And lastly, I helped lead product on her website, which was highly personalized and targeted in order to mobilize supporters, volunteers, and get out the vote. A presidential campaign, for all intents and purposes, is the ultimate startup. In less than 2 years, you raise and spend close to $1 billion in order to do one thing: turn out voters to vote for your candidate. That and spend part is the unique thing about a campaign. In fact, if you end your campaign with money in the bank, you've done it wrong. The goal is to fundraise in order to spend money on media buys, organizers in the field, travel, and so forth. My time on the campaign was where I fell back in love with the craft of building collaborative, scalable, technical products. It's also where I not only learned, but deeply internalized how actively pursuing diversity and inclusion promotes a healthy, safe, collaborative, high-functioning, and fun culture. The Hillary for America campaign was a fully functioning startup for 577 days, and the tech team was the product team within that startup that consisted of product managers, designers, and full-stack engineers. In fact, here's the full tech team. I think this was taken a few days before the 2016 election, where we topped out at close to 90 people. The campaign's commitment to diversity extended far beyond most folks even understood. Over 50% of the full national campaign staff was female. Of the campaign's more than 500 staffers nationwide, more than 1/3 were people of color, including nearly 40% of Hillary for America's senior leadership. These numbers roughly reflect national demographics, and thus these hiring choices were intentional. From the beginning, starting with Secretary Clinton herself, there was a commitment to staffing an election team that represented the diverse makeup of the country she was trying to lead. This was a very intentional choice. As for the tech team, I'm proud to say the diversity continued. The product management team was a whopping 50% female. The engineering team was 34% female, and we had a female CTO and a female chief product officer. Here's a picture of all the women on the tech team, including our CTO, Steph Hannon. It's amazing how almost 15 years into my tech career, it took joining a presidential campaign to finally work for a female CTO. Not only gender and ethnicity wise was the campaign staff a diverse group. As a team, we came from varying economic backgrounds. We identified as LGBTQ. We were children of immigrants and more. This was critical in order to build messaging, outreach strategies, and voting plans that spoke to exactly these audiences that made up our country. To put it in product parlance, the campaign's users was every person in America. And so in order to understand and connect with that user, we had to make sure that user was represented in the room in some shape or form by the team that was trying to reach them. These diversity statistics are why I want to talk about my time on the Hillary campaign, because I truly believe by having so much diversity on both the tech team and the campaign staff writ large, we had more diverse thoughts and opinions and could better represent America in all its varied shapes and forms. It's not just lip service to say that. The digital products that we built and the collaboration that happened was better, faster, and stronger because we had a truly diverse team. In fact, I can prove it. During the 577 days the campaign existed essentially as a startup, we launched 55 new applications or services into production. This roughly translates to one new app or service launched to production every 10.5 days for 19 months straight. Here are some screenshots of the variety of products that we built to help with voter registration, to contrast the candidates, to help volunteers make phone calls or texts to prospective voters, to help with election administration and integrity, and so on and so forth. A new app or service launching to production every 10.5 days for 19 months straight is incredible. That kind of velocity isn't achieved at even the most high-growth rocket ship startups. And I deeply and sincerely believe the credit for that explosive impact is because we had a team that was representative of our country. That diversity of people and thought led to a safer, healthier, more collaborative environment where idea to concept to execution was just seamless. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir by this study. From a performance perspective, we know 43% of companies with diverse management exhibit higher profits, and companies who have more female members in top management see higher returns, while diverse management teams boost revenue by upwards of 20%. But we also know representative talent is not just a performance issue. Employees want to work on diverse teams. That same study showed how close to 60% of employees want to see their company increase diversity. And a whopping 83% of all millennials and Gen Zers are more likely to be actively engaged if they believe their company vocally supports a diverse and inclusive culture. Though these stats stare us in the face every single day, we all know that getting buy-in from leaders within the organization is the critical key necessary to unlocking a diverse and inclusive team. Yet, that key can sadly prove elusive sometimes. You don't have to actively raise your hands while sitting at home. I recognize that's a little weird, but I wonder for how many of you the following scenarios are all too common. Say, employees within the organization are calling for more diverse representation within their teams, especially at the leadership level, or on specific teams like engineering or finance. However, the commitment at the leadership level to prioritize this effort remains limp. Or other scenarios, maybe this has happened to you, it definitely has happened to me in my career. As a hiring manager, I'm told to hire diverse talent. Yet I and my recruiting partners have no real support in making that a reality. Though we are told this is important, when we ask for the money or the time to do this properly, suddenly resources don't exist or interest has waned. Convincing leadership to not only value, but prioritize and resource diversity and inclusivity efforts, especially in the recruiting and hiring space, can be really tough. I've been lucky in my career to work at organizations that have valued this, but I have also advised companies, especially resource-strapped startups in that seed to growth stage part of their life cycle, where this tension still exists. What I found is if your organization is struggling to recognize the value of inclusive practices when it comes to hiring, there are 3 things to consider. First, talent sourcers, recruiters, and hiring managers. Whether you realize it or not, you hold incredible capital in this conversation. You're able to quantify through the statistics that guide your day-to-day around how current hiring funnels are performing. And you can really paint a very vivid picture of what things could look like if more energy and resources were diverted towards sourcing more diverse talent. The analytical insights you pick up through your day-to-day work is a goldmine, a precious asset that can be mined to tell a data-driven, compelling story regarding the reality of your organization's hiring practices. Personally, I find leading with data to be a particularly effective tactic when organizations believe they're caring about diverse talent, but the numbers just don't show it. Second tip, because of the natural collaboration that arises between recruiters and hiring managers are great allies to bring in order to build momentum on this important conversation. Recruiters and sourcers, you know it's not easy to go at it alone. So sometimes, in order to get leadership to listen and commit, critical mass is needed. What better than to leverage hiring managers who you work with day in and day out as partners in this effort? Third, I've seen plenty of organizations debate the wrong topic, and that can really derail diversity in hiring efforts. Arguing about whether diversity is a good thing is simply asking the wrong question. A much better question to ask is, how is the overall performance of our company linked to diversity? In order to answer that question and to answer it honestly, the conversation will naturally steer towards performance. When the resulting conversation is honest and rooted in data, in most cases, companies will find that the optimal blend of talent requires greater diversity than what they currently have. So remember, to catalyze buy-in and commitment for inclusive and diverse hiring practices, you have 3 tools available to you. 1, use data to clearly understand the reality of current hiring practices. 2, use your hiring managers as allies. And 3, steer the conversation towards the link between company performance and diverse and well-represented employees at all levels. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible challenges and difficulties this past year has posed to all of us, not only as talent recruiters, sourcers, hiring managers, and senior leaders, but as employees, employers, and humans just trying to navigate life right now. We've gone through one of the most divisive and tumultuous times politically in our modern history. And unfortunately, this divisiveness doesn't look like it will ebb anytime soon. We are, of course, in the midst of an unprecedented global pandemic. As Ed Yong wrote in the March 2020 issue of The Atlantic, quote, "COVID-19 has crashed economies and broken healthcare systems, filled hospitals and emptied public spaces. It has separated people from their workplaces and their friends. It has disrupted modern society at a scale that most living people have never witnessed," end quote. Amidst political division and a raging global pandemic, we also bear witness to the reality that Black people continue to be murdered and brutalized by police with near impunity. So in the midst of a pandemic, we are awash with profound grief and anger. Sometimes it almost feels like it's too much to bear, and yet we are here. As we navigate the realities of quarantine, political and economic uncertainty, and pervasive anti-Black violence, community and connection are more important now than ever before. We should take a moment to celebrate that we are here and we are still standing. We are showing up every day and doing the work required of us, and we will continue to persevere with the resilient human spirit each one of us embodies. Now, it may be provocative to say this, but through all of this chaos, I see an opportunity for all of you, an opportunity uniquely fit to you as a talent acquisition professional. As talent recruiters, sourcers, and hiring managers, you play a pivotal role in helping to adjust the balance of representation and inclusivity in our industries towards the better. You can help ensure caregivers continue to stay in the workplace. You can help champion the need to recruit and hire from underrepresented groups, different cultural backgrounds, different economic levels, sexual orientations, and so forth. It's now more important than ever before because we know for a fact this pandemic is wiping away the gains we have made to diversify our workplaces over the past few decades. A recent McKinsey report shows that in August and September of this year alone, more than 1 million people dropped out of the workforce. And of that 1 million, 80% were women. 1 in 4 employed women, which translates to 1 in 3 mothers, are considering quitting or dialing back at work. Mothers are juggling school closures and daycare chaos in addition to work. Partners and extended family are pitching in, but it's not enough. When women leave the workforce, they're not exercising their options. In fact, it's a sign they've run out of options. So I wonder something. I wonder whether there's something you can do today, tomorrow, and in the days and weeks to come to push back against this reality. Is there a way to more explicitly and intentionally target and hire women back into the workplace? Of course, this won't be successful if organizations aren't changing their work cultures and expectations in order to make sure caregivers can be successful in their roles amidst their caregiving responsibilities. As talent recruiters, hiring managers, founders, and CEOs, are these conversations you can catalyze within your own organizations? What can you do to champion the necessity of adjusting work practices to balance the realities of caregiving during the pandemic? In fact, I challenge all of you to come up with 1 or 2 tactical things to be able to recruit and retain women and caregivers within your organization. I can share a few things we've done at the ACLU to explicitly address the challenges for our staff who have responsibilities to care for loved ones. We've expanded eligibility for our formal paid leave policies to include more paid leave to care for a child whose school or place of care has been closed. We've introduced a reduced work schedule policy during the pandemic for caregivers that provides more pay than the schedule would normally allow. This enables caregivers who need to exercise a reduced work schedule to balance the demands of their lives to practically exercise that. We've introduced a capacity sharing pilot that is specifically intended to reduce the workload of caregivers and rebalance the work across other staff, interns, consultants, and volunteers. And lastly, we've introduced a significant caregiver reimbursement for excess caregiving expenses incurred due to the pandemic. My hope is that at your organizations, similar policies are being enacted, or at least being discussed. If not, can you, as a talent acquisition professional, start this conversation? You're at the front lines of the sourcing and recruiting funnel, and thus you have a unique vantage point to help explain the need for these types of policies, if not to attract new talent to open roles, but to retain existing talent at the organization who may be suffering under the new responsibilities and expectations the pandemic has thrown onto their plates. And lastly, I wonder if there are tactics to try and catch those 1 in 4 employed women before they decide to leave their careers. Do organizations have the right pulse checks in place to understand the temperature of their employees and intervene before their breaking point? At the ACLU, we've made clear during the hiring process, onboarding process, and especially during the first 6 months on the role that everything is malleable. Their role, their responsibilities can always be adjusted based on the needs of the organization or the needs of the person doing the job. At the end of the day, their success is our shared success. And if we can make that clear and really honor that statement with our daily practices in the workplace, including reducing workloads, offering leaves of absences, and aggressive reshuffling of duties, I wonder if those 800,000 women who dropped out of the workforce in August and September would still be working today. I'm reminded of a quote our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the ACLU, Amber Hikes, shared with our team early on in the pandemic. She reminded us that we are not working at home during a pandemic, but instead we are home during a pandemic trying to work. The best way to make trying to work as successful as possible is to leverage the natural relationship that sprouts up between a talent acquisition team and the management team to make sure working practices are being adjusted for the needs of the moment. And boy, does the current moment really require some out-of-the-box thinking. So as we come to an end, I hope some of the topics that we covered today resonate with you and lead to more fruitful and inspired discussions in the sessions and fireside chats to come throughout the rest of the GEM Summit. I want to end by really recognizing how grateful I am for all the work that you do. You truly are change makers within your teams, companies, and within industry itself. As someone who has personally benefited from the insights and creativity of recruiters, and someone who has partnered extensively with recruiters as I've hired and grown my own teams, I know firsthand how it can sometimes feel like a thankless job. As talent acquisition professionals, I want you to know that though it may be unsaid too often, we as hiring managers and leaders committed to leading diverse and inclusive teams are so thankful for your hard work each and every day. Your commitment to creative sourcing and a dedication to collaborative recruiting changes the work environments we are all in for the better. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I wish you the best for the remaining summit.
Deepa, thank you so much. I honestly was just so moved by your experiences and challenge that you posed to all of us in talent acquisition industry today. So before we go, I do have some questions for you. Of course, this was so empowering for all of us. And just thank you for reminding us all of the agency we have in creating real change in our organizations. So I'm thinking about your suggestion about bringing hiring managers in as allies. And so we all know that oftentimes in organizations, speed of hire takes priority over diversity. Do you have any suggestions for how to have that conversation with hiring managers and arguing for diversity when time to hire is paramount?
I fully understand, and that is absolutely, a real world phenomena that, I see all the time and I've had to deal with. And I get it, speed is critical. However, I firmly believe that it's much harder to deal with the wrong hire or the lack of diversity on a team than it takes in order to find the time and commit to making the right hire. You might have to really close the role quickly, but you also have to consider at what cost. And I think this is a good framing to sort of take up as you have that conversation with the hiring manager. These are the types of conversations I have as a hiring manager myself if I'm getting pressure, say, from my peer leaders to close particular roles, or if I'm trying to convince a hiring manager hey, let's wait and think creatively about how to maybe broaden the funnel and get more diverse talent to come through. I really understand and empathize with the hustle and bustle and rush to hire, but ultimately it's not worth the cost if that rush means that you're missing out on all the benefits that we just talked about in my talk earlier. So it's really worth it to have the time and the patience and the creativity to think about broadening your funnel in order to find the right person who will match well with your team and, allow the team to really shine. And so I think that's a really important and critical conversation to have. And that framing of the cost of a speedy hire versus taking the time is a great sort of hook to have.
Yeah, that's great. I think that is definitely something that will help a lot of folks in the audience as they're navigating those challenges. So that is really helpful. One more. Could you speak a bit to recruitment's role in the recent policy changes you've implemented at the ACLU? You mentioned eligibility for paid leave and reduced work schedule policies. Yeah. How many teams exactly do you think were ultimately involved in those changes? And how did those conversations begin?
Totally. And I'm really lucky from the beginning, the ACLU has been, really thoughtful about how to handle everything that this year has thrown our way. So this policy was really led by our very supportive and hands-on HR team. But, maybe going back in time a little bit. So as the pandemic really took hold and we started shifting to working from home, there began to be a regular cadence where all department heads, including myself, came together to talk about the strains that our teams were under, either strategic or workflow or morale or anything like that. And so first off, having that regular group convene, especially in the early days of the pandemic, meant that we were sharing feedback collectively in real time and then plucking out commonalities and highlighting what needed to be addressed. So this open forum feedback was sort of the catalyst for these policy changes. That's where we started, realizing our spidey sense went off like, oh my gosh, our caregivers are really suffering. And then what we did was, I think, something really smart. Instead of immediately jumping into kind of coming up with some policies, we actually started with a caregiver survey that we sent out to everyone at the organization, asking them very specific questions to better understand the pains that they were under in order to better diagnose the problem and come up with a more, well-matched and thoughtful response. So between having just great pathways to getting feedback from department heads and the organization writ large, through to that survey to get sort of direct feedback from caregivers themselves, those things led to the eventual creation of these policies. And that direct feedback was really how we came up with that 5 pillars that I kind of talked about.
Yeah, that's great. I think, speaking from experience, just the pulse surveys that we get regularly, I truly appreciate as an employee, and the action that's taken there. So I can definitely hear what you're saying from that. So thank you. Thank you again, Deepa, for being here with us. This is all the time we have for today, but we are truly so grateful for you joining us and just being here and giving us the time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.